I think it was very helpful that you taught us that perfectionism doesn't exist as far as symptoms and that things are just going to ebb and flow. And also that there's always options to make different choices and to do something differently.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Christa Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together.
All right, today on the Less Stressed Life, I have something new. I have Kelli here. Kelli is a past client of mine with a background in mental health counseling. She's currently a stay-at-home mom of 3 children under 7, which I would argue, I always joke, was my most challenging time of life and careers, and some people are made for it, the challenging and rewarding career. So I invited Kelli to do a little bit of an interview today because I just found her journey to be interesting and inspiring for others. What about her journey was useful, maybe inspiring, is that I felt like it was a little bit more linear from the outside than some of our clients. And we don't ever really expect healing to be totally linear. I'll explain exactly what I mean by that. It can be quite meandering, but it's always a relief when it is. And what I like to do is look at common denominators. And so regardless if your path is linear or very non-linear, I could look at those common denominators, and I wanted to get Kelli's feedback about things she thought allowed her to get results faster. The other thing that one of my colleagues and I talk about all the time is that we often think that we're alone in our healing. And so any possibility we can shed a light into someone else's healing can help us feel like we have more of a community, which is this unrecognized essential component to healing, I find. And I would say that our thoughts are made up by what we surround ourselves with. So no matter what our echo chamber is currently, I think I'm always looking for stories of inspiration or hope personally, or proof of what's possible to expand my thoughts and then give me a renewal of the mind. I was actually in a funk the last week and a half, and I was talking to my own coach about flipping back and forth or improving my own neuroplasticity. And what kind of the download I got was metanoia, or renewal of the mind. I always have to find renewal of the mind and look for inspiring things to pull me out of a funk. Our brain is always seeking proof. So when we only seek proof of negative, then we believe that's all that's possible. But I asked Kelli if she would mind coming to share a little about her story, her journey, and what she thought the essential pieces are. So I thank you for coming to join me today, Kelli.
Thanks for having me, Christa.
Yeah. I feel like I am fortunate to get to see Kelli. Still sometimes past clients, I'll think about them. I wonder how they are. But in the last year, I've started having a small group of past clients that I meet with monthly. And it's just fun to see something I didn't really bring up in some of the interview questions today. But Kelli continually shows me how she's like continuing to use things to benefit herself and her family, how she's continuing to use her learning and apply it. And I always joke, some client asked me last week, like, I forgot the exact context, but she was like, how do you suggest I consume this or understand this or whatever? And I was like, you get the most education from action and results. Would you agree? It's like, It really sinks in. It's like when people they're flirting with illness. I was talking to my daughter today who's in Rome, and she said that everyone is sick because one of the professors came over from the US and brought the flu for a wedding, and just 30 people in her study abroad cohort, and they're all sick except for her and her friend because they're downing immunoglobulins like it's their job between classes, and it's working. And I've just used her story because this is a common thing I share with clients, and clients that experience it, they're like, oh my gosh, that worked. And then suddenly we believe it because we saw the results. So Kelli, I want to ask you, and I'm a jabberbox. As I ask you questions, I may comment generally on how there are things that are similar to what I see with other clients or even different than what I see in some of our clients, just to share that perspective, since I get the honor of walking with lots of people, so I get to see all those common denominators. But first of all, how did you arrive here? How did we find each other? And this is actually fun for me. I love asking people, like, How did you decide to book a call with this person you'd never met on the internet?
Mhm. I had eczema is what led me to you. And I had it for 7 years and I had tried a lot of things on my own, but I didn't know where else to go. And I really wanted to find the root cause. Like I knew, okay, these things when I do, they help, but I didn't understand why.
Mhm.
And when I was searching root cause of eczema, your information came up and I actually started with one of your old courses on the
Old.
root cause of your eczema. Yeah. But it was attainable, like it didn't feel risky to start with that. And I liked the information you were sharing. And I did even after that for a couple months. I'm going to try to figure this out on my own. And then it just got to a point where I was like, I need to find somebody who knows what they're doing. And from that course, and I had listened to some of your podcasts, I just trusted that you knew what you've done because you share all of your experiences, I think, of yourself and your clients. And so I came to you.
Something I'll share with you, it's help. I don't always get to talk to people in this context or in this way, to be honest. And I might be funny for you to hear that I used to run away from this being a purpose for me.
Mhm.
I was really avoidant of wanting to work with eczema primarily because I was it was like the weight loss of the skin. It was like you can have other things going on and you can ignore them, but when it shows up on your skin, it's like it brings us to our knees a bit. And I say that from personal experience. And I always joke that I know it makes me a better clinician, but unfortunately, I've had all the same problems my clients have had. So when they come to me and tell me they've had that issue, I was like, I completely understand. I completely understand you don't have black clothes in your closet. And I understand why, if your skin is flaky or whatnot. And people have different types of eczema. So before I was welcoming, I've done a 180. I'm like, okay, I'm embracing eczema because I think often our own journey is just part of it. We have an opportunity to help others through our journeys or through our challenges and through our own struggles. So my eczema journey was in about 10 years ago, crazily enough. But there was something else I really flipping loved helping people with. So before I was more openly saying I will help with eczema, which by the way, everyone would come for anyway. And the reason you found me, I think I was looking at our notes also is because I got asked to write a cookbook, which was very insufficient for my feelings. The publisher made me cut 10,000 words, things I never talk about on here. I just love to share behind the scenes. If anyone likes behind the scenes, I wish I could do a podcast on behind the scenes stuff because I always think it's really fun. But the publisher made me cut 10,000 words and told me, this isn't a textbook. This is a cookbook. But what I actually started in food sensitivities, and that was something I loved helping people with. And there's still things I prefer to help people with, like getting them to all day energy, but people don't necessarily want to pay to get to there. They're like, I'm just tired because I have 3 kids under 7 at home. That's what the world tells you. So there were some of those. You had some of my other favorite things that you wanted to resolve also.
Yeah. Food sensitivities. I think you're right. I was probably actually Googling the root cause of food sensitivities because I had found that if I stopped eating gluten and avoided fragrances and all these things, then my eczema was a lot better. But I didn't understand the why of the food sensitivities. And yet that was the main goal when I came to you.
Yeah. Actually, you make a really resonant point for a lot of people that I haven't fully gotten into a soundbite yet. But people are like, I fixed my eczema without any gluten and dairy. I was like, yeah, but you could also enjoy it potentially. And actually, I'm going to stop right there because I was so glad when you told me, whenever it was, a handful of months ago, you were like, I can eat gluten now and I don't have issues. And you were how many years without gluten?
I had been, from 6 years.
Yeah. Let's say I fully agree. Food is medicine. One of my nutrition philosophies is whole food is best, but also we're doing our best and leaving the rest. And I think a lot of people come to me because they're like, is this all we can do? Is there more we can do? And I would say, yeah, there is. I like croissants personally. I like to enjoy. This is a good thing because I actually did also start in a restrictive place under the guise of health. I thought it was good. And then I saw what would happen. This is probably good for me to share that I started with food sensitivities in the middle of my own eczema journey. I was transitioning from working in a clinic to doing food sensitivity work. It sounded really interesting and fun. It sounded like fun puzzle pieces to put together. I love putting puzzle pieces together. And So it was really interesting, but it actually personally, if you don't know this story, it made my own eczema much worse to restrict. That's a whole different story, but I haphazardly made everything much worse by restricting. And sometimes that happens to people. And then the other thing I was seeing after working with food sensitivities for a long time is it was great until it wasn't great. And I was really concerned about the food fear that was coming from it. And I was like, this is actually worse for your health to be fearful of food than to enjoy that food. So thanks for sharing that part, because I think that's really resonant. And that's like the stuff that like touches my soul and my heart more than some of the, like, I was like, I really want to help people resolve their food sensitivities because they're unnecessarily restricting and it's sucking the joy out of their life. That was the transition I made in about 2022 fully. Cause I think before that I was just like all inflammation. Then I was niching down to food sensitivities. And then just recently now I'm like, okay, I see eczema. Because people were like, I barely see you talk about this, and I'll be interviewed about it, but I could talk ad nauseum about eczema just because you have a lot of experience with it. So expect more content on that because it's an issue that affects a lot of people, and I just feel like it's optional. It's optional. Do you want to share any other symptoms that you were looking to correct, just because they're extremely resonant?
Yeah. So you reminded me that my eczema had been around for a while and I had not done gluten for a long time, like we just shared, but my eczema was at that point was starting to get worse.
Mm.
So the one tool I thought was working, I was like, oh, and I was just really scared of having to cut out more food because when you look online, that is the guidance to restrict. And I didn't want that. And so I think your information about, hey, it actually doesn't have to be that way. There's another option where we don't have to just restrict. We can heal from this. That was really inspiring to me and exciting.
Yeah.
And then I think those were the main symptoms I thought I had. And then I talked to you and you were like, what about these other things? Like I would get sores all over my tongue, but I guess I had accepted that was normal. Yeah. And just eczema in different places where again, like in my armpits. Oh yeah. And I guess that is eczema too. And fatigue, although I did have young kids, so it is hard to sort out, but the fatigue was certainly a big point. And the way my digestive system would vary up and down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And most people will walk around because that's not something people are going to ask you about. They're going to be like, did you poop today? Because did you know if you didn't poop today, it's not actually normal. And there's a lot of pieces there. So when I looked at those primary things that you were wanting to resolve, eczema and food sensitivities and improve gut health and focus, I love focus also. Another thing people would never come to me for if I wasn't helping them with food sensitivities and eczema first and sugar cravings and canker sores. But I'm obsessed with helping people with energy and focus. Actually, it's a really fun thing. But even I've had people say, yeah, no one's going to pay you for that unless they already trust you. And I was like, but if you get all these pieces right, it like works amazing. And again, that's a whole different story for another day. But that also comes from a result of my own personal things. Like I used to just think I had ADHD. And may I have ADHD? Possibly. I'm not a person who's going to pursue diagnosis. I just need to focus. I just need to have good focus. Like I just need to not be a squirrel. And when I get to be that way, I know I got to bring things back into balance because all symptoms are just signs that your body's trying to share with you that are out of balance. And yeah, the other thing that you shared is that anytime we can improve awareness around symptoms before they come diagnoses, they tend to be easier to resolve. So for example, I may or may not talk about sluggish thyroid, which is a little confusing to people because that means it's subclinical. It's not necessarily showing up on blood work and it's a lot easier to help. And I didn't want to go talk about that. I'm a crazy person and some people would come back and they would have relapsing gut issues. And if you have some sluggish thyroid, you'll have slow motility and it'll be like a bird bath and you'll have relapsing gut issues. And I like to achieve. So I was getting like driven crazy if I had any kind of like failure. And so you'll see all that stuff gets built in. I'm like, hey, this is how you prevent relapses. Okay, so you shared a little bit about eczema. So when I'm assessing a case of eczema, if it's like a child, I'm asking about birth story, parental history, or genetic predisposition, and just like life. And the history is short. But when I have an adult, they always have a lot more variability in their life. Very often they have it as a child and then it goes away and then it comes back. I didn't see that in your history that you actually had it as a child. So tell me I know you were skipping gluten for about 6 years before it was like not really working for you anymore. But when did eczema start for you?
Yeah, it actually started within the month of when I got married. Mm-hmm. But you helped me see too, that was actually 8 months after we moved into our first home, which ended up being quite significant.
Yeah. Did it ever worry you since it started after you got married?
I like to joke about it, but no, not really. But at the time, I didn't really understand. I thought
Yeah.
it was just something outside.
Yeah, I understand. I think everyone wants eczema to be pretty simple and very external, right? Very,
Right. Yeah.
because we're just humans. We're like, I should be able to put cream on this. And then it doesn't work forever. I always like to joke about that too, because I like to think about my own health. And I think part of our journeys in our lives is our ability to be aware of anything. And so I sometimes look backwards at like, when did I have XYZ thing start? And I always joke that like, yeah, my health really went downhill after I married my husband. Also, I was like, we do in a physical way, we share microbiota with those we live with, whether romantic or non-romantic, but there are other factors, of course. My husband, I always joke, he was broken when I got him. I think he thought I was going to save him, as we do. That's another episode. When you feel like you need to be saved in a place. And so, yeah, he had his own imbalances and things. And I think he was excited that I was into health, which of course was attractive at that time. But anyway, I digress. It doesn't matter. So that was interesting, that eczema, because often people would have something, or they'd have something else in the atopic march, either asthma, allergies, or eczema as a child, and then quote unquote grow out of it and then have it reemerge. And then it's actually a little more layered. And I just share this because your story allows me to expand on conversations I have day in and day out with humans. We are very similar. When do you think you noticed? I know you were eliminating gluten for a long time, for 6 years. When do you think, what's a little bit tricky with food is that I would make a very strong argument that food is a secondary thing. It's actually not a primary cause, technically, of a lot of symptoms. Again, food is medicine, so we need to consume good foods that we can actually use and break down to nutrients, right? So not all foods break down to very useful nutrients. Some of them are actually nutrient depleting. I'm thinking about some of the standard American diet, just stuff we know is junk food, right? But my clients come in, they already have a healthful diet, and that's a little unnerving for them, is they're like, I am eating well. It shouldn't be this hard. And so I'm curious how you got onto that. If you remember, it was a long time ago. We forget the past, but I'm curious how you got into playing with foods and food sensitivity stuff. And did you notice anything besides gluten causing issues for your symptoms at all?
No, first, like you predicted, I did everything externally. I did that for probably almost 2 years. Let me try doing all the skincare. And then I just landed on, okay, I have to try the restriction diet. It must be something. And so I did 30 days, gave up the top gluten, dairy, and then sugar, and then added them back in. And gluten was the only one that I totally reacted to. And when I did cut it out, I didn't have a breakout for at least a year after cutting gluten, which was pretty significant at the time.
You thought you had it figured out.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yes.
This is clearly my problem. And I understand. Yeah. And this is where it is more normal for people to come to me after they've done several things, understandably. But you hear in Kelli's story, it's really not different than most people's story. And even my own, I think I had eczema. I have to look back on it. I know I had it in high school because I was prescribed topical cream for certain areas, but I thought it was family. I thought it was genetic because my sisters had it in the same places. And granted, I'm not blessed genetically, but we actually cannot diagnose or blame things on genetics. It's actually what else is happening in the environment and in our body at that time. So it would come and go, worse in the winter. Some people have it worse in the summer. There's all those like little things. And then, yeah, there was several pieces before it broke out like hella bad. And of course, and as a dietitian, of course, I want a diet to be the answer. And I was like, wait a second. This is actually not enjoyable. It's actually starting to suck. And we don't initially feel that way when we're first feeling good as we clean up our diet. And I do think it's totally fine for people to do diet experiments and see what they feel like. And I don't have judgment. I ran into a friend from 20 years ago this weekend. He's like, yeah, I'm a carnivore now. And I think and I was like, cool, whatever. Like, maybe you'll love that forever. Maybe you won't. Better than some things. Better than some things. I'll try not to digress on that. Okay. We may have covered this a little bit, but why do you think you were moved to, I think you said it already, but what was that final straw that you were like, I think I need to get help with this?
Yeah. Once it spread to my scalp, the eczema on my scalp, it was like disrupting my sleep because it was really itchy and it was bothering me a lot throughout the day. And all the things that I could think of to try that didn't seem like too risky, I had tried and they weren't working. So I needed to, I knew I didn't know what else to do. So I know I needed to get help.
Sure. I'm bummed that this is more common now. It's not always. I looked at your history and I believe it said you hadn't really seen a ton of practitioners, but nowadays I'm usually looking through another practitioner's work. I'm kind about it, but I'm looking for what the issues are because I just want to help people get results. I don't want to work with anyone I couldn't get results with. Although what I find the common denominators are when people come to me from other practitioners is they either had a decent test that they were told was unremarkable or there was nothing they could do with it or essentially they didn't do an effective treatment no matter what, or they missed some pieces or they treated it really generically. So when I say treated really generically, the person comes in on some of these products, maybe more or less, an elimination diet or a gluten dairy-free diet on omegas, zinc, maybe a probiotic, the most generic toolbox in the world. Fine. If that works for you, fantastic. Super happy for you. That is not what I do. But you did not exactly, I don't know, who had you seen? What had you done before you arrived in my virtual office?
Yeah, I had spoken to two just like family doctors about it. Like maybe, like I mentioned it at the yearly checkup and they didn't really know anything what to say. And the only other place I knew to go was a dermatologist, but I didn't want to go to a dermatologist because I didn't want steroids. I didn't want the creams. I wanted the deep fix.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I hadn't gone anywhere else. I wanted to dip into the functional world and I was waiting to find somebody that I trusted.
Yeah, cool. Very commonly people go to the dermatologist and then at first maybe they're okay with getting a steroid, which a steroid, they can be useful. I do like people to sleep, so they could be useful then. They're a double-edged sword. We're not supposed to be on them very long. Unfortunately, when we're on them for a long time, they thin our skin. They can cause some issues. I didn't use them very long and I had the ramifications of steroids for years, unfortunately. And I do not say that as a fear thing. I'm just like, that's a bummer. Like, I wish I hadn't. And I feel bad if people are on them longer. So people will come and say a lot, steroids take it away. And when I take the steroids away, it comes right back. I'm like, duh, it's not really doing. It's just shutting down the inflammation. There's lots of things that we can do to just turn off inflammation, but it's actually not finding. We often think inflammation is root cause, but inflammation is coming from another root cause, just like food sensitivities. So it's actually secondary, even though it's a real good buzzword. And one I've used for many years accidentally because I was also obsessed with the concept of inflammation in 2017. That's why the name of the podcast is called The Less Stress Life, because I was looking for a synonym for inflammation. And this is all I came up with. And here we are. And it worked out. There was many years where I was like, I don't know if that's the best name. So you have a unique, took calculated action a little bit. And then, yeah, there's some other, I think the other reason people sometimes present is that after steroids, unfortunately, the next treatment is often very expensive biologics in the tune of a few thousand per month. So when people are like, these are my two options, not very good. I always say, unfortunately, it's not a very deep toolbox yet. And we are coming there. I would say there's more improved topicals than there ever has been in the last few years. And yet I go from an inside out approach for the most part. We give lip service to topicals for sure, because we don't want fires on the skin. We don't want infections on the skin. So there's some things we want to help heal the skin faster. So those are things we consider. And I always joke like we want eczema to be easier and it's literally twice as much work sometimes as just getting someone unconstipated. So, okay. I'm curious also. So you took really calculated action and I think everyone has individual feelings and stories. Why do you think that I know you've shared this in another way, but I feel like my approach is such that here's why I do the thing I do. And then I'm going to ask you like why you decided to take this route. If I saw people only when they wanted to be seen, which would be, they might choose once every week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, I would not be able to control their results as much as I want to. It would be more challenging to get them results because I wouldn't be able to talk to them or support them at the intervals that are actually necessary to get results. This is something I know from working very close with clients for a very long time. I always say clients are my best teachers. They taught me everything I know about how to get results for the most part. And for me, I feel that it's in poor service to my clients to not work with them for an amount of time to help them get results. I will also offer that humans, I love observing humans in this beautiful way, because I always joke, let's not blame ourselves for being humans. Humans have a few months of stamina. They're not going to want to do something. I always say, if you've been working with someone a year, 18 months, and it's not resolved, it's not a long time, actually, unfortunately. And maybe there's reasons for that. I've got a client who's got some pretty deep history and her stuff is resolved extremely slowly, but she has such a good attitude that I'm here for it because her attitude is so fantastic. And that makes a big difference to me. But for me, I create things with a couple filtering questions. And one of the filtering questions is, what is in best service to my clients? And so for me, I try to give people what they need to know up front. And I try to tell them, here is the cost, here is the timeline. I don't want you to be surprised because, and I do this out of my own trauma as well. Like I used to see different practitioners and it would be maybe a few $100s for the appointment and then $700 for supplements. And then I just didn't know where we were going. I couldn't see the roadmap and it felt indefinite. And that was my experience as I was digging through my own health stuff. From about 2010, 9 or 10 to 2015, I was doing a lot of that stuff because I had a husband who had symptoms. And so I was coming from that. And it was trained in like muscle testing and things before, but I struggled to see the end of it. And so for that reason, I just say, it's going to take about this long. You could see results in as little as 1 month, but it may be 6 weeks. So I've gotten really good at trying to communicate as to the best. I really like clear communication, resolves or unmet expectations and things like that. So my question to you is, especially sometimes there's this unfortunate dynamic that happens when people have seen more practitioners, they have now spent more money, unfortunately. And then they're also eager to go to someone who they believe can be helpful. You skipped the spend a bunch of money before you got to me. Fortunately for you, I'm so thankful for you because I'm always like happy for that for a client. And then you came into my world and you could have said, I think I'm going to go try something a la carte. I think I'm going to go see the local naturopath, whatever. And so what do you think? How do you think you justified? Yeah, I think I want to go all in with this particular person without all these other negative experiences that some people have. It's a hard question. Sorry. It's a little loaded.
Yeah.
Because it's an investment, I think. And the reason I honestly think things have to be an investment to take them seriously. But unfortunately, one problem for me is I see all the problems people have that they don't see yet. And I'm just like, oh, but I'm going to need to fix that and that also. So I just need enough time. I need enough capacity with you in order to fix those other systems. So that's like where I'm coming from. And I'm really curious how you were like, I think I trust her, or I think I'm going to justify this. And also like, you're a stay-at-home mom right now too. And I have lots of stay-at-home moms, but I'm always just curious because a lot of times then maybe your husband's more involved in that answer than just you. So I'm just curious how you justified it.
I think that for me, maybe it came from, I had tried so many little things, albeit on my own. I think it felt clear like this isn't going to be, if there was a magical cure, I would have found it. I would have found it in my hours of searching. And I think I understood this is going to be, if it's a root cause, it's going to be a deep fix and we would need time to do that. And your program is just comprehensive, that it wasn't just, I'm going to fix your eczema. It was, I'm going to fix your food sensitivities and the fatigue. And also you want to set somebody up for success moving forward too. Not, I'm just going to give you these tools. You'll know what you're doing while I'm in my program and then you're done. And so I think it felt like a worthy investment because it wasn't just to fix one thing. It was to fix a lot of things and also learn what to do moving forward.
I appreciate your feedback on that because you're validating exactly how I feel about it. And you heard me say it was driving me crazy if I had people who had relapse. Depending on your personality type, you're just going to keep improving things. I literally am going through a huge improvement upgrade right now, not because there was anything broken, but because I'm like, I see that I keep being asked these questions. How can I make this faster and easier for people, right? It's how I make it interesting for myself and more of a challenge there as well. So I didn't know you had a background in some clinical work also. And so I wonder if having a background in clinical work in a capacity where in your work, people also needed to see someone for several sessions to have lasting change. Do you think that influenced kind of your own perspectives on that potentially?
Yeah, I think so. I think I work a lot with trauma. And so I think knowing this is a process to undo this and to heal from this, it's very similar to, what you're doing.
Yeah. I will say that I don't always know where people come from, what they do, because they don't always necessarily share that with me. Sometimes they do. But there's been a lot of times I've taken a little bit of a very loose inventory, and at any given time, sometimes I have 30% practitioners. And we can think about why that is. But I would say that these are people who value health typically, or they just have a little more awareness. And if they're not practitioners, they're ultimately health conscious people. Otherwise, they wouldn't care probably, maybe. And then, of course, there's probably other exceptions too. So one of the reasons I invited you here is because I thought it was interesting. I thought your progress was lovely. And so I like to take inventory, look at the common denominators of people who improve faster and some that improve slower, have a more meandering journey. Everything is okay. But what I see that you had some very specific root causes that can challenge clients, like physically, emotionally, and some people have a freeze response and they become paralyzed by overthinking. I've now added resources so we can try to push through that faster because I see that as literally just slowing people down. You didn't come in the door and think that was slowing you down, but it's like the thing all the time. Usually I see that some of the root causes you were dealing with, just take another month or two. Everything is fine. Everything is treatable. But I was really intrigued when I was talking to you around month 4, and I was just noticing that your progress is linear. And what I mean by that was that clients rate their symptoms. They have a whole list of symptoms that they rate, which is another useful self-awareness tool. I always recommend if you're listening to this and you want to do some DIY stuff or you just want to get started, look up multiple symptom questionnaire on the internet. Fill one out. Really good also for if you're trying to support your family or your husband. And part of the problem around trying to do something for someone else is like you have to have self-awareness as the first step or know something that is an issue. And so a multiple symptom questionnaire allows you to note that some of these things like canker sores or ulcers in the mouth or throat clearing, these are actually technically not normal things, but are not diagnoses. And so what people do when they walk in the door is they fill out a form so we can get that. And ideally it's objective measurement. Some people fill it out with a lot of emotion, and so it can go up and down, but it's meant to be pretty objective because you're like, how am I rating this every single month, essentially? And so what I was noticing was like your first form had a symptom rating of 45, and they can vary all over the place. They can be 40, 50, 120. Like they're all over the place for people, just depending on what they have going on. So your initial score was 45, and then the next month it was 37, and the next month it was 17, and the next month it was 10, which is what, like over a 75% improvement within those 4 months, which is exactly what I want. Nowadays, I try to undersell improvement. We can get improvement in the first month for sure. But I say I would really 50% improvement in everything within a few months, ideally 75% or more within a couple months after that. But it varies depending on how long someone's had something. You have it over a decade, it could just take a little longer. The goal is as fast as possible. So I was intrigued because you had some of the things that catch people up and cause a little bit more of a meandering journey. I was surprised that your symptoms were as linear. Like it was like great to see because I was pretty accustomed to seeing a more meandering journey in that. And we go in waves in practice too sometimes. But I was really intrigued by that. And I was also noticing that you presented a little more calmly, not like in this large, because sometimes people, their emotions like ooze out of their pores a little bit, and that's okay. And so I just noticed that you were presenting calmly, and that might just be your personality in general. It's all neutral, but I was just observing. So when I see people getting results faster or slower, I just like to evaluate, what do I think is going on here? So I have opinions about what's going on. I, of course, combed through your history and it was like, what else do I not know about Kelli? What else is she doing that's helping her do this quicker? Why do you think you're getting results faster? And I wanted to ask you what you thought were some of your best practices, because no one wants to hear more from me about this. I want to know what you think helped you make more linear progress. Not that one could expect that, go in without expectation, but without perfectionism expectation, but also with the goal is to reduce. So, but anyway, why do you think you were getting results quote unquote easier? Maybe it was not easier. Maybe there was a lot of work there. But what do you think were some of the best practices? What could you share about that?
In past winters, my son has gotten dry hands that can crack and bleed. I found that giving him at least 300 to 600 milligrams of high-quality fish oil really resolves this in a few weeks. This year, I started him on Jigsaw's Alaska cod liver oil because it's the best value for high-quality U.S.-sourced cod liver oil. Just 1 teaspoon gives him 1,000 milligrams of total omega-3s, which just means faster results with nature's natural dose of synergistic vitamin A and D,
already found in cod liver oil to support immune health. Jigsaw sources their cod liver oil from Alaska, where line-caught fish are flash frozen on the boat. This keeps the fish oil very fresh, so it doesn't require more processing and deodorizing like other fish oils, which can disrupt the oils and nutrients. So when you combine Jigsaw's incredible cod liver oil with some of their other wonderful electrolyte mineral products, it's a winning combination to keep your skin beautifully hydrated year after year. You can get a discount on all of Jigsaw's products, including Alaska Cod Liver Oil, Electrolyte Supreme, Adrenal Cocktail, and Potassium Cocktail, formerly known as Pickleball, at jigsawhealth.com with the code LessStressed10, which you can use on each and every order. That's code LessStressed10.
A few things. So I do think I had started nervous system work before I started working with you for about, I think 5 or 6 months, I had focused on that. I do think that one, I was already open to that part of your program that's about your nervous system. And I understood the importance of that. I was able to apply that very regularly. And then 2, I think the biggest thing is just I took action. So we identified that we most likely had mold in our house. And I got off that phone call with you and I went and told my husband. In that hour, we looked around our house. Okay, what could be going on here? And that weekend, we started doing what we could and just we broke things down because obviously we couldn't do everything all at once. What can we just do right now to get started? And I think that helped me move me along much quicker.
Yeah. And what is not necessarily verbalized exactly there, so I'm going to paraphrase it, is because you had done some nervous system work, which we do nervous system work in the program also, is if we can break through the thought process of overwhelm, which is a common scenario. My observation is people are overwhelmed before they enter working together. And I just like to unpack that with them real quickly and attempt to. And we had one of those sessions. So you were doing nervous system work before. And within that first month, we did have a session where you did acknowledge, you were like, I feel like there's just a lot going on. It feels like a lot. And that statement shows up a lot. And a lot of times it looks like overwhelm or fear. And then what happens next is people freeze. And so then they just literally don't take action. They're like, maybe this will just go away on its own. Maybe everything will be fine. And so we then talked through that and created a different thought process, which was like, I can figure out what to do, or I'm able to learn each step as I need it, just one little bit at a time. And the feeling became confident and capable instead of rumination and fear. And so it was really, the result was like you were trusting in your own capability and awareness. And again, you had been practicing that stuff. It's easier if you've been practicing. If you haven't practiced some of that at all, it just takes practice. It's like strengthening up muscle with the nervous system. And why do I care about this? Why does this matter at all? It's not just mindset work. It's actually physiology. If your body can't perceive whether stress is physical, emotional, etc. And so whatever is going on in your thought processes is being processed through your body as well. And so when we communicate freak out or overwhelm to the immune system, the message your immune system gets is overwhelm. And when your immune system is overwhelmed, you will have a bucket load of symptoms. That's a simple way to say it. And so every time I learn something, I can't unlearn it. Unfortunately, I'm like, oh, this is a big needle mover. Dang, this is a big needle mover, right? And so I just really pondered. I was like, man, I wonder what else Kelli was doing, because we did that. We had that conversation early on. Not that was enough because but it was probably a little bit helpful because you'd already been doing some of that other work. So it was easier for you to embody it, maybe as opposed to someone who hadn't done stuff. And I would say something that might be useful for other people as well is that generally you'll find that anyone who's had symptoms for quite a while, there are some real neural pathways that get shifted and formed. And so you'll pretty much find the recommendation of doing nervous system work is essential for long-term healing. It really makes your life a lot better. But I did kiss lots of frogs before deciding which nervous system modalities to include in my programming. And I'm always attempting, not that I want to try to do everything, even though it feels like it. I'm always attempting to, how can I try to make this a little more accessible and easier so people aren't having to invest in multiple different things at the same time. If we can try to make it easier for people, that's the goal, because, we don't need to add more overwhelm to their life. So that's helpful for you to share. And that was just really, I was like, this is outside. Usually it takes people a little longer when they have this or this going on. That was pretty cool. And also, I just want to talk about this. We covered this already, but you were doing nervous system stuff. We talked about how your background in mental health probably was useful. Or I was talking to even clients earlier today in a very similar session. And this client was talking about a useful conversation she'd had with her husband. She's, yes, took lots of years of therapy to get there. I was like, I do find that can be common denominator. Work has to be made, however you choose to do that. There's work in there. Not saying that I do any therapy in our programming. We just have nervous modalities to shine a light on the stressor so you're not processing it through the body. And then we have body modalities to help you process it through the body if you would like. Just the ones that I have loved over 4 years of trialing and erroring. I mentioned at the beginning that I get the honor of talking to you on a regular basis. I get the honor of seeing you along your journey, and you are incredible at sharing with me, look at this cool thing I'm applying right now. And again, when you apply, you get a ton out of it, and it takes time to do that. And so it's been really fun because I want to say, hopefully I can say this. I think last month you were like, yeah, I had no period symptoms this month, and this is what I learned. Or maybe there was something with your family's health. So I was just curious how you've continued to use what you've gained in working together to help yourself and your family.
Mhm. I think one of the best tools you've given us is the ability to look at our symptoms and to see what's changing, what's not. And just the idea of, okay, if this comes up, I can just try a little experiment and see what is going on. So I don't actually track it anymore, but I just have that mindset of, okay, maybe for this month, I'm going to try these ideas and see how I feel or see what I notice in my kids. And when you take it at a small chunk like that, it just doesn't feel overwhelming. I think it feels more hopeful and exciting.
And I think what is underneath the surface there is that sometimes, and this is just a perspective, so just a way to reflect. I have seen people get frustrated that they do not know everything that is in my brain within 5 months. And I was like, that is not how that works. Just I can't download these years of experience. I'm trying to help you understand as fast as I can so that way you can do this stuff on your own. But what you just shared is really useful. Sometimes we'll do lots of things to try to get good outcomes, but sometimes when you're just tweaking, there's a few little things, and it's nice to do one thing at a time so that way you know what's helping or not. So I think initially I try to cover lots of bases because I know covering lots of bases is going to give me specific results. And then later it's not perfect yet, especially menstrual cycles are funny because they only show up once a month, right? So what happened that month, the month before that can all impact it. So it's nice if that's something you play with a little bit longer over time. Even if you have initial success, it's a little messenger every month to let me know how everything went in my body, all the things. So like it. Thanks again. You're sharing how you go through. What you're not trying to do is sometimes we're trying to rush. I want you to get efficient results, but I actually had to change one of our business core values from efficiency. I had to take it away because it was actually stressful for some people to think that, because it's actually a subjective statement. What's efficient to me is different. If you can heal in 6 months and you've had issues for 2 decades, pretty damn efficient in my opinion. It's just, it looks different. But our human desires are that efficiency is 3 weeks, which is only reasonable for some symptoms.
Right.
Only some symptoms respond in that short of time. Some of them will take a little bit longer than that for sure. Is there anything else that you'd want to tell someone that's going through what you went through?
Yeah, I think these are really some pearls that I've learned from you, Christa. I think it was very helpful that you taught us that perfectionism doesn't exist as far as symptoms and that things are just going to ebb and flow. And also that there's always option to make different choices and to do something differently. And we can always learn more. We're just not stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always. You are very good at taking words out of my mouth, which I appreciate because there are things I say a lot. I'm glad someone's paying attention, using it, and it's useful for you. And what I'll offer is that you said like symptoms will ebb and flow. And I will say similarly, symptoms are possible. So what I want people to know is that while our goal is to always resolve completely or mostly all of the symptoms that you have, most of them are pretty fair game. Some of them are, there's different symptoms that respond differently. By the way, chronic pain, super annoying, but slower to resolve. Stuffy nose, pretty easy. Symptoms are possible. And so when we're talking about eczema, food sensitivities, constant, whatever, energy stuff, like stuff happens, life happens. And so my approach or my goal with clients is to teach them how to resolve it. Because when you get the result, you understand it in a very
Mhm.
different, visceral, embodied way. And then I want them to know how to correct it in the future if it ever wants to peek out or pop up, because there are things that create that. It's like, if it happened once, why do we think that we're immune to having it again? And that's a perspective shift I've really attempted to start to, and I'm doing it better and earlier now as I remodel things, right? I saw people, they were like, oh my gosh, I just want to close this chapter of the book because I never want to read this chapter again. And it's, you can have that feeling now, but this is all here. Like, your body's just communicating with you, right? So it's just letting you know something's out of balance. And my entire thing right now is really helping people understand symptoms related to systems and bringing systems into balance. And that's how you get long-term success for everything.
Mhm.
And know that, like, stuff can happen. I was recently on a trip and I had some symptoms pop up and I just dealt with them and got rid of them. The end. That was empowering, right? That's empowering. My goal is that you're not just relying. I was like, I don't love this negative reliance on someone. Someone else knows more than you about your body. That
Mhm.
like just didn't feel good to me. So thank you for appreciating these things. I'm really glad I asked.
It's very empowering the way you've made your program. Like, you can tell that you're like, hey, I don't want you to actually need me. You don't need Christa for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Use this. And
As a parent, it's an exhausting feeling to feel like it's like a lot. Technically, it's a lot of space to hold. And it's not that I don't want to. And that's why I work with so many people at once. And then we're done. And then I work with another group of people because I care about humans, quality over quantity. And so I really do want to know them, to be able to help them to know the answers to their questions because I know enough about them.
Mhm.
So and everyone, it's optional. Like, people, I don't have to know everything about everyone, but you certainly have the opportunity to let me know as much as you want about me. I make it open-ended. It's like, we can do as minimum or as much as you want. So that's how I attempt to make it work for different personality styles. Is there anything else that you want to share that you'd want anyone else? You gave some really beautiful pearls, which is, there's always options. Symptoms are possible, but you can know how to correct them. And what was the third one that you had?
Oh, I think it was just like that around perfectionism and that it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Don't tell the perfectionists. They don't believe that yet, but that's okay. Life is 50-50, guys. Life is 50-50. There is bad, and then we shift into the better as well. So, but anyway, any last or closing comments before we wrap up this recording? And thank you so much for coming on today.
No, it's just, I've really enjoyed my time in your program, and I can see myself getting healthier and healthier moving forward. Thanks to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really fun to have these kinds of conversations. I feel like I don't really get to have them as much as I should be having them. Like, why wouldn't I have them more often? So thank you so much for sharing your experience for the benefit of us all. I hope those listening took some pearls, and thank you for your kind of inspirational statements and kind of experience and journey, whether someone's experience is linear or not. So thanks for coming on.
Bones, but they just keep breaking.